Hey, good morning, everyone. Today our topic is discipleship and the cross. We're going to look at Mark chapter 8, verse 31 through 38. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he spake the saying openly, and Peter took him and began to rebuke him. He, turning about, and seeing his disciples, rebuked Peter, and saith, Get thee behind me, Satan, for thou mindest not the things of God, but the things of men. And he called unto him the multitude with his disciples, and said unto them, If any man would come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life shall lose it, and whoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's sake shall save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world, and yet forfeit his life? For what should a man give in exchange for his life? For whosoever shall be ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he cometh in the glory of his Father and with his holy angels. So as we see Peter's call here, or response here to Jesus' statement, we really could, I think, relate. Peter speaks, I think, not only for himself, but for all the disciples, saying, We will not allow our king to be taken and killed and crucified. I will stand by you to my death. We are ride or die, all of us. He wanted to see Christ's kingdom established, and he wanted to see it established in a certain sense by force if necessary. And I think we can relate to Peter, right? We look at the world around us and we're like, we want enough of this ungodliness, right? And we will stand by Christ, even if that means, being socially ostracized on social media. I will stand and post these Bible verses or statements and stand against the world, right? Because we will not allow Christ's rule and reign to be attacked by atheists and secularists and all those that would turn against the church and against the true gospel and the true law of God by which we should be governed. And I think so we can relate to Peter in that, because we want God's rule to be a blessing upon us and a blessing to the world. And we got to just proclaim it. But Christ is really saying, he tells Peter that his cross is one marked by suffering. Not the glory that Peter perhaps is after, right? Maybe not the glory that we're in fact seeking. And let's look at what Bonhoeffer says here. This is, again, from the Cost of Discipleship, which we've been looking at. He says this, To die on the cross means to die despised and rejected of men. Suffering and rejection are laid upon Jesus as a divine necessity, and every attempt to prevent it is the work of the devil, especially when it comes from his own disciples. For it is in fact an attempt to prevent Christ from being Christ. It is Peter, the rock of the church, who commits that sin immediately after he had confessed Jesus as the Messiah and had been appointed to the primacy. So he's appointed leader, and yet he can make this confession that Jesus rebukes right after that. That shows how the very notion of the suffering Messiah was a scandal to the church even in its earliest days. This isn't just a Western concept now we're fighting with people, right? This is something that goes against our human nature. We do not want rejection and suffering. We want God's blessing and peace and prosperity. That is not the kind of Lord it wants, and as the church of Christ, it does not like to have the law of suffering imposed upon it by its Lord. Peter's protest displays his own unwillingness to suffer, and that means that Satan has gained entry into the church and is trying to tear it away from the cross of its Lord. So how does Satan distract the church, tear it away from the gospel? It makes us think that there is no suffering, that it's only peace and blessing and prosperity. And whenever there's sunshine and rainbows, let's say, that's where God is. Take the easy road. Let's keep reading. Jesus must therefore make it clear beyond all doubt that the must of suffering applies to his disciples no less than himself. Just as Christ is Christ only in virtue of his suffering and rejection, so the disciple is a disciple only insofar as he shares his Lord's suffering and rejection and crucifixion. Discipleship means adherence to the person of Jesus, and therefore submission to the law of Christ, which is the law of the cross. To take up our cross means not just suffering, it means to die to ourselves. To die to the God who is us. We have one God and we will follow him. We have one Lord and we will follow in his ways, no matter what that brings, no matter the pain and suffering or social ostracization. Now, we don't really know suffering in the Western world like the early Christians were persecuted. There are parts of the world in which people are still imprisoned and tortured and even killed for their faith. So many understand this better than us. But I think when we truly walk in the way of the cross, there's going to be suffering, whether that be outward persecution or just not benefiting the way the world benefits. We don't Lord's Day, right? We could be making more money, but we take time to worship Him. Sometimes maybe your children are in sports, and I've known parents to say, hey, we're not going to allow our children to play sports on Sunday, and the kids want to play, and the parents want to see their kids play, and it's painful in a certain sense. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't call it persecution, but it's painful. But the parents say, we're going to put the Lord first, and this is a sacrifice. Maybe it's not cheating on your taxes and being people of integrity and ethics, and no one would know, but you say, I'm not going to use this to get ahead. Maybe it's an extramarital affair, or if you're single, maybe it's a non-believer that is appealing to you in every other way, but you're saying, no, for the cost of my Lord, I'm going to sacrifice this relationship. I'm going to sacrifice this temporal pleasure to live out the gospel. So I don't know what suffering is going to look like in your life. These are just a few examples that come to mind. But the point being is when we truly follow Christ, there's going to be a road that is not easy. And it's not just sunshine and rainbows, but it's a road that is true. It's a road that our Lord walked, and as disciples that we must walk in. Have a blessed day. We'll see you tomorrow.